There is a gap in the life of Jesus that nobody in the church talks about, not because the answer is controversial, because there is no answer. Luke records Jesus at 12 years old sitting in the temple, holding his own amongst the rabbis. Every teacher in the room is astonished. His parents find him after 3 days of frantic searching, and he says something that has never been fully explained.
Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?
Then Luke closes the chapter. When the story reopens, Jesus is 30 years old, standing in the Jordan River, and John the Baptist is pouring water over his head. 18 years gone, no miracles, no teaching, no record. The most documented life in history has a hole in it the size of 2 decades. Daniel was not a skeptic. He was raised in the church. He knew the nativity, the baptism, the cross, but the gap bothered him in a way he could not explain. Not because he thought it proved something, because he could not understand why nobody seemed bothered about it. If Jesus was God, he told his pastor at 19, what was he doing for 18 years? His pastor smiled and said, growing up, then moved on. But Daniel did not move on. Here is what most people do not know. The early church was not silent about their missing years. They were obsessed with them. In the 2nd century, a document called the Infancy of the Gospel of Thomas circulated widely. It filled the gap. A young Jesus fashioned the sparrow from clay and brought it to life. He cursed the child who bumped into him and the child dropped dead. He healed his brother after an axe wound. Miracles, drama, the supernatural childhood everyone expected from the Son of God. The early church rejected it almost unanimously. They did not reject it because the stories were too strange. They rejected it because the early fathers who studied the Gospels closely recognized that it fundamentally misunderstood what incarnation meant. That is the argument we're going to get into, because it changes everything about what the silence actually is. But first, the theories, because they are worth going through properly. In 1894, a Russian journalist named Nicholas Notovich published a book claiming that he had discovered ancient Buddhist manuscripts in the Himalayas monastery, describing the travels of the saints named Issa. Jesus, he argued, had spent his hidden years in India and Tibet studying under Buddhist masters before returning to Judea. The book sold enormously. It also fell apart immediately. When scholars went to the monastery Notovich named, the abbot had no memory of him. The manuscripts he describes could not be located. Multiple investigations concluded that Notovich had fabricated the source material. The India theory did not survive scrutiny, but the question he tried to answer did not go away. Daniel found the Notovich story in his mid-20s and sat with it for a week, not because he believed it, because it told him something about the question itself. Everyone who asks where Jesus was, he said later, is actually asking something else. They want to know why the silence was allowed, why God would become human and spend 18 years doing nothing that anyone recorded. That is the sharper version of the question, and it deserves a sharper answer. There's a phrase in Luke 2:52 that almost every reader skips past, and Jesus increased his wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. That sentence is doing some theological work that its brevity disguises. The Greek word translated increased is prokopto. It means to cut forward, to advance by removing obstacles. It is a word from the language of road building. It implies real effort, real time, real resistance overcome. The Gospel of Luke, written by a physician who prized precision, is telling you that Jesus did not arrive at 30 already complete. He grew, he advanced by the same slow, unremarkable process that every human being grows. Now, here's where most people stop me. They say, if Jesus is God, how does God grow? How does the infinite learn anything? That objection is the entire question, and the early church spent 300 years working out the answer. The answer is the Incarnation. The word incarnation comes from the Latin carne, in flesh. The theological claim is not that God visited earth in a human body the way a person visits a hotel. The claim is that God became human, fully, without remainder. The word fully is where the hidden years live. If Jesus was not fully human, 18 years of obscurity makes no sense. Why would God pretend to grow up? Why would the omniscient need to learn how to use a carpenter's tool? Why would the creator of the universe spend 2 decades in a small Galilean village where nobody significant lived and nothing significant happened? But if the incarnation is what the church actually claimed, God genuinely entering the human condition, not performing it, then the hidden years are not an absence of the story. They are the story. Okay, let's pause right here. If this is the kind of depth you came here for, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Most people watching have not subscribed yet. 2 seconds and you can catch the next one. Like the video too. It puts this in front of people who need it. And if you want all the research behind this, or you just want to support the channel, there is a Patreon link in the description. The research document for this video and other videos will be posted on Patreon. Alright, back to the video. The carpenter is not a stage that Jesus passed through before the real thing started. Every church father who wrote seriously about the incarnation made this point. Irenaeus in the 2nd century argued that Jesus had to live through every stage of human life to redeem every stage. He could not skip the ordinary years. The ordinary years were the point. This is why the infancy of the Gospel of Thomas was rejected, not because its miracles were impossible, because they turned the hidden years into a performance. A child Jesus who raises the dead and curses his playmates is not growing into wisdom and stature. He's already complete, and if he's already complete, incarnation is a costume, not a commitment. Here's what locked this together for me. Every major figure in the Old Testament who was given a great calling had a long hidden period before it. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before the burning bush. David spent years as a shepherd and a fugitive before the throne. Paul spent 3 years in Arabia after his conversion before he began his public ministry. The pattern is no coincidence. The hidden period is the preparation so unremarkable it leaves no records, no miracles, no teachings, just formation. Jesus of Nazareth, son of a carpenter, raised in a town so obscure that Nathanael's response when he first heard the name was, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" That is the address where the most important information in history happened, and nobody watched. Daniel eventually found something like an answer. Not the specific record of what Jesus was doing in the missing years, because that record does not exist. But he found the theological logic underneath the silence, and it changed the shape of his question. He stopped asking why God would waste 18 years on nothing. He started asking what it meant that God thought nothing was worth 18 years. The silence does not embarrass the story, he said. The silence is what makes it believable. A God who skips being ordinary is a God who never really came. I want to be clear about what this framework does and does not answer. It answers the theological question of why the silence exists. It does not tell you where Jesus physically was, what he built, who he knew, or what he was thinking on the morning he turned 25. That is genuinely above the historical record. I am not going to pretend otherwise. What I can say is this: the Gospels were written by people who knew Jesus personally or interviewed those who did, and not one of them thought the hidden years required filling in. The silence in their accounts was not a gap they forgot to close. It was a gap they chose to leave. Maybe they understood something about the meaning of ordinary time that we have spent 2,000 years trying to recover. Drop a comment below, tell me what exactly you think the silence means. I read every single comment, and what you say shapes what I go through next. If this opened up something for you, the video on the Divine Council nobody talks about is linked right here. Hit subscribe and the notification bell so that you don't miss the next one.